Welcome, everyone, to the Simply Real podcast. Today, I have a very special guest with me. I'm so excited. Larry Penton, who is a firefighter and licensed paramedic. He's also the CEO of Penton Pending Consulting Solutions, LLC. Larry, I'm so happy to have you on board today. You know, after meeting with you on Clubhouse and just hearing the wonderful things that you're doing, spreading such motivation, spreading such awareness, and really just being that voice of inspiration, you know, I wanted to bring you on the Simply Real podcast, and I'm so happy and privileged to have you as a guest today. How are you doing?
Oh, great. How are you doing?
Doing great. You know, it's beautiful start to the day after, speaking with you now.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So tell us a little bit about Larry Penton Pending Consulting Solutions. What are you all about? And tell us a little bit about it so our viewers can get a good idea of who you are.
Well, again, my name is Larry Penton. I am the CEO and co-founder of Penton Pending Consulting Solutions, LLC. Our job and our company's focus is consulting. We started out primarily focusing on helping entrepreneurs that are startups do all the administrative tasks. So it doesn't matter from A to Z if you are a farmer, if you are a speaker, a writer, if no matter what your job is, if you need help with setting up websites, doing the background work as far as HR, payroll, some tax information, forming your LLC, that's where we come into play. We also will help you start and upload your content to your social media platforms. And so that's primarily what our company initially started out doing. And that's what is listed on our website. Since I am a paramedic, still have an active medic license from the state of Missouri. I thought, I retired in May of 2020 after being on the front line fighting COVID. And so I said, well, what can I do with the medical side of me? And so I have a number of certifications. One includes being a certified stop the bleed instructor. So I teach people how to use tourniquets, how to deal with hemostatic gauzes, chest seals, and what to do to survive in real time. If you're in a situation where some active violent incident happens, and when I say me, I'm talking about myself and my work partners, who includes Professor Griff and Dexter Doc Piggins, who is a 23-year Army veteran retired. We go around the country and we do podcasts on Professor Griff's show talking about teaching people how to survive in real time in these active violent incidents, whether it's involving a firearm, whether it's involving explosives or other weapons. So I said, let me go ahead and add that to the consulting part of our business, because people always come to me about medical stuff from A to Z anyway. Right. And that's kind of just a little skinny of it. And we can dive into that even in more detail if you want.
Yeah, no. So I do want to take one step back for some people listening in who may not know who Professor Griff is. I mean, I know who he is because I'm a big fan, but why don't you tell us a little bit about who Professor Griff is and what he does and how he's sort of involved in the whole thing?
So Professor Griff, I am 51 years old. I grew up in—
You definitely don't look like it.
Thank you so much. I grew up and I'm from St. Louis, Missouri, and that's where I worked in practice until May 21st of 2020. As a teenager, I grew up listening to groups like Public Enemy and KRS-One and Boogie Down Productions and different things like that. So Professor Griff is part of the hip hop group Public Enemy. Now, he's been in and out over the years for different reasons, but he's still a part of the group. And so he was their Minister of Information, and he also was their tour manager, which a lot of people didn't know. And so he has a platform on YouTube and other platforms called Serious Minds. Serious like the satellite channel, and Minds with a Z. And so each week, if you go on his YouTube page, if you just Google Professor Griff, you'll see a bevy of shows that he does on a weekly basis. And so he also is a certified firearms instructor with the National Rifle Association and the United States Concealed Carry Association. So he tours the country teaching people, especially Black and brown folks and women, how to safely use firearms. He has a course called STELP, Safety Training, Education, and Legal Protection. The way I got connected with Griff, he did a show back in September 2021 called What's in Your IFAC? IFAC is an acronym for Individual First Aid Kit. And his show is normally about an hour. And he talks about everything from A to Z. And so I chimed in and I was like, oh, I got like 4 different ones, because you have first aid kits for different reasons. And so the IFAC is a tactical first aid kit because it has the tourniquets and all the things for a major trauma. And so he said, hey, I want to partner with people who have like minds that want to talk more about helping our people survive in real times with these pieces of equipment. So I chimed in, and our future work partner, Dexter Doc Pickens, chimed in also. And he gives his number out freely, like when I gave you his number, he gives that same number out.
Yeah, he's very easy to speak with. He's very easy to approach. He's, a wonderful person.
And so I texted him and he called me back and I was like, oh my God. So I'm trying not to have a fan out moment because, I got like perfect, I got everything.
That's what I was trying not to do.
Yeah. And I told him, I said, Griff, I'm trying not to have a fan out moment, but I got to tell you, I said, I'm going to give you 1 minute of fandom. And he just started laughing, he appreciated that. And so the conversation was maybe 6 minutes long. And from there, we just formed a great partnership between the 3 of us. And so each week, if you look at my profile on Clubhouse, I list all the shows that we have done since September. And like I said, they're an hour long. And so we just talk about like current events like the Travis Scott fiasco. What do you do if you're a concert goer and you start seeing people going into cardiac arrest? Or the shooting that happened in Michigan with Ethan Crumbley. What do you do if you're a student or staff and you're seeing your classmates getting slaughtered there? Like, how do you deal with those situations? So that's part of what we talk about, not only on his platform, but what I talk about with my company also.
Right. And, it's so amazing. And I got to tell you, I had that fan out moment, too, because I'm like, I have Professor Griff's number on my phone for public. It was an amazing moment, but he's truly an amazing person to connect with, and I think the work that you guys are doing is much needed and warranted. What are some challenges that you're facing as you're going into the community, raising awareness and bringing this to the forefront? What are some challenges that you're seeing as you are trying to pull this all together to create this much needed awareness and safety?
The challenges that I see is just lack of awareness for one. I would say that our communities have so many issues that we deal with, whether you're talking about systemic racism, poverty, lack of jobs, low expectations in terms of people being accepting of us. A lot of Black and brown people feel like, hey, I'm just here. I'm just trying to survive. I can't think 5 years in the future. I can't even necessarily think 5 days in the future because I got to worry about how I'm going to keep my heat on. I got to worry about if I'm going to have a roof over my head in these 4 walls because I'm about to get evicted because I haven't been able to pay my rent. So I don't have time to think about the stuff that you're talking about. And just a whole list of things that we tend to deal with in our communities. However, when people talk about Black on Black crime, it's a misnomer because crime is not about race, it's about opportunity. It's about control, it's about, or a lack of control. People typically don't commit crimes for no reason. It's like, I'm not walking around like, okay, whose car can I break into today? Because I don't have a reason to break into somebody's car. I have my car, I have access to my wife's car, I work, different things like that. That's me. That's my life. That's my mentality.
Right.
When I didn't have a car, I was taking public transportation. So those things are part of my mental stability. If you have a different mindset, and this is part of what we deal with, the mental health aspect of my company, because that's something that I have been dealing with more and more, the mental health issues. I say all the time, and to further answer your question, I'll even say this because this will cover everything. Mental health crisis is the world's oldest continuous pandemic. It's been around since day one. You can find it in all historical aspects. If you are a believer in religion, you can find it in various theological doctrines. Mental health crisis is part of the fabric of our lives, and it ain't going nowhere. And it's part of why we deal with all of these issues on a daily basis. We, as Black and Brown people specifically in our communities, are dealing with a lot of these issues, and they affect how we move and what motivates us each day. And so we also have the stigmas, the stereotypes, and the taboos when it comes to mental health that keep us from seeking mental health help.
Right.
That's the other thing that we focus on.
Yeah, and that was going to be my next question, is that we have so many stigmas and we have so many people saying that these cultural barriers are preventing us from having this open communication about mental health, which is so important. And you're right, it's the core and the foundation of a lot of issues that we're facing. And as you're going about and communicating, how do we start breaking those stigmas? What can we do as even like the smaller communities who are trying to create changes? How can we start changing those conversations to break those stigmas and become more aware that this is real? Mental health is a real thing, and that we really have to start talking about it more openly, more honestly, and realize that it affects each and every one of us, no matter where you come from.
Dialogue. Having conversations like you and I are having, not just because you're interviewing me. When you go and talk to your family, when you talk to your friends, when you talk to your neighbors, your coworkers, people that you don't, especially people that you don't know,
Right.
People that don't look like you, that don't sound like you, that don't interact with you on a regular basis. My definition of community is common plus unity plus dialogue. You cannot have one without the other. There are 7.8 billion with a B as in boy people on this planet currently. I did a Google search a couple of weeks ago. That's the current number. Nobody's going anywhere. I mean, you might move, like I moved from St. Louis to Charlotte in 2020, but I'm not moving off the planet. And so I have some new neighbors and new people that I can meet. And in my interaction with these folks, I'm having these conversations. My family on my wife's side is white because my wife is biracial and she was adopted as a little kid into a white family. And so I have a different conversation with them than I would maybe have with people in my community back home, because they typically weren't having some of these conversations that I would have with my people or people that look like me in my hometown. And so that's part of it. I think also when we're talking about mental health, we have to, again, get away from these stereotypes, because if you think of the movie One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest that came out in the 70s with Jack Nicholson, that was a very specific display of how mental health was dealt with back in those days and even beforehand. The lobotomies, the people getting drugged to the point where they were just catatonic, getting put in straitjackets, put in these padded rooms. And so I always say, here's a great icebreaker. Ask somebody what's the first word that comes to their mind when they think of mental health. And I'll tell you, if I had $1 for every time somebody said crazy, my bank account would look like Elon Musk or Warren Buffett.
No, you're
right. Because people think of mental health and they think, oh man, I don't want to be labeled as crazy and all this
Right.
stuff. So we have to deal with those things, and a lot of that comes with dialogue. They don't do the lobotomies anymore. Now they have electric shock therapy. There's different medications. There's cognitive behavior therapy and EMDR, which is phenomenal. So there's many different things on the list of mental health that is available now to help people deal with these things.
So I want to go back to something you said, and this is just to have an open, honest conversation, because I want to understand. So you mentioned that the dialogue that you have with different races is different. So just explain that a little bit. Why would the dialogue be different? Or because for me, I think that mental health is universal, right? But I do understand your perspective, but I want to dive into that a little bit more just to understand when you say the conversation you may be having with different communities, why would the dialogue be sort of different, and how do you approach that?
There was an article that was printed featuring me back on August 19, 2019 in U.S. News and World Reports, written by this former senior writer Joseph P. Williams, entitled Diversity Emergency. Mm-hmm. And that article talked about the need for more Black and brown people in EMS, mm-hmm. and why that's important. And it talked about how having a lack of diversity in just EMS alone and medicine creates its own problems, just like any other career. The more that you have Black and brown people in these fields, it matters. If you want to say Black Lives Matter, you can say that. I don't have a problem with that. I don't think that the conversations that I have, when I say different, I don't mean that I'm not having the same conversation with them as I would have with the people that I grew up with and that look like me. When I say different, I mean that conversation may not have been had with people who don't look like me. So when I'm talking with them, I may bring up a subject that maybe they haven't talked about, maybe they haven't thought about. Let's take, so me being a paramedic, I always tell people when I went to medic school, I didn't learn how to treat Black and brown people only. When I worked for a private EMS service, or when I worked for a paid fire department, they didn't say, okay, and this was a primarily Black fire department and a primarily Black and brown fire district. We didn't learn how to just put out fires only in the Black and brown community. We didn't care about who owned the house or whatever.
Right.
And so when I have conversations with people, I talk to them about how this matters.
Right.
A person seeing me show up on the thing, because I've dealt with a lot of racism and prejudice in my 14 plus years in fire and EMS. When I show up and I have a white partner, most of the time the focus is on my white partner, even though I'm the medic. My partner may be just an EMT. All paramedics are EMTs. Not all EMTs are paramedics. Mm-hmm. So I'm the one in charge, but most of the time they would go to my white partner and start talking with him or her. And I'm like, hello.
Right.
And so it's just, those are just some of the things that I focus on when I talk to people that don't look like me. It's like, hey, I can have the same intelligent conversation with you that you can have with somebody that you deal with on a regular basis.
Right.
However, if you're not willing to have that conversation with me because my skin tone, that's an ignorant thing. And so these are things that I talk about when I talk to people. Like in my family it has been great in terms of they didn't just start accepting me, quote unquote, because I came into the family in 2017. My family has been very, and I hate using the word tolerant because that means that you have to accept somebody. They have always been looking at people as people, and that's a whole nother story in and of itself, how great they just as people in general, and we're humans. And so those conversations that I have with people about diversity are key all across the board. And I just look forward to having those conversations. Like when we talk about critical race theory, it's about history. You can take the race out of it if you want to just talk about, okay, well, I'm not trying to make you feel bad because your ancestors were either slave owners or because you have the same hue as they are. Because white folks have done stuff to white folks. I just saw a thing on PBS where they were talking about the history of concentration camps. Well, these white folks were putting other white folks in these concentration camps when they started with the person who created barbed wire and an automatic rifle. And I was like, wow, why aren't we talking about that? I didn't learn about that in history class.
Right.
So these are things that I talk about when I talk to people that don't look like me, to try to even the playing field and have the dialogue.
Right. And I think that's part of the challenge, is everybody seeing everybody as equal, as one, and having these diverse conversations. And I think it's something that's continuing to evolve as we continue to have these conversations. And I think what you're doing is amazing. And being on the brink of this is truly a great aspect. Now, I know we spoke a lot about being in your field of being a licensed paramedic and firefighter, and you've seen so much, and you've definitely been involved in so many different situations. And I love what you said about the gun safety with Professor Griff. I think that's much needed. And talk a little bit about that, about the gun safety program, because that's something that's so important, especially now with what's going on in the news. And as you see all this gun violence, and with all these upcoming rappers and shooting cops, and just so much craziness happening. And I think gun safety is one of those important topics that I'm happy to hear that's being highlighted. So tell me a little bit about that program and how that's sort of impacting your world and the community.
So part of what, and I'm a student of Griff's when it comes to gun safety and training. I've been a gun owner even before I met Griff. I'm not in the NRA. I have a membership with a company called U.S. Texas Law Shield. They provide legal protection, liability insurance, basically, and I think it's like $11 a month for starters. That if you have some incident with a gun or a firearm or a weapon, you have 24 access to an attorney that they take care of all your fees and all that stuff or whatever.
Okay.
For $11 a month just to start out. You can add stuff to your policy if you want. With Griff. And again, his program, one of them is called STELP, Safety Training, Education, and Legal Protection. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to firearms, and this is a training firearm for those that may see, I don't know if you're going to broadcast this Zoom video, but when it comes to firearms, we talk about the 4 universal firearm safety rules. And he uses the acronym TANK. So the TANK. Number 1, treat all firearms as though they're loaded and always perform a clearance check to make sure there's no round in the chamber. He is always be sure your target and what's beyond it. So in the news recently, there was a young lady that was killed in LA at a shopping mall when the police officer fired a few rounds at a suspect. One of those rounds went through a wall and it hit her on the other side when she was in the dressing room. So this is where the A comes in. Bullets go through objects, and a bullet has a stop. Even if you shoot it in the air, like when people fire off weapons on New Year's Eve, whatever goes up comes down at the same velocity. N is never point your firearm at anything that you're not willing to destroy. So we talk to people about that. If you're going to point your weapon at somebody, why are you willing to do that? Because you're willing to take this person's life. Whether they stepped on your sneakers, they, gave you the finger while you were driving down the road or something like that, or whatever. Right. And then K is keep your finger off the trigger and outside of the trigger guard until you have acquired your target and are ready to shoot. That's important because a lot of times people don't understand when you have your finger on this trigger. Let's say somebody startles you, your reflex is to clench and flinch. Right. you're going to pull that trigger and you may discharge it accidentally. So these are things that we talk to the community about when we're talking about firearm safety, especially in our community. So our focus is fourfold. We want to help create emergency operations plans for houses of worship, schools, businesses, and the community at large. So when Doc and I, when we go out across the country and we're talking about stop the bleed and tactical emergency casualty care, we talk about these things because all traumas are not involving firearms. But since a lot of people are using firearms to do these traumatic events or incidents, and we use the term active violent incidents because we know when you start talking about shootings and stuff like that, sometimes you can get caught in that metaverse stuff and get blocked and everything. And most people still refer to it as active shooter hostile events.
Right.
But when I say active violent incidents, that covers everything. And in our community, because there's so many firearms that are being used and a lot of them aren't legal, we talk about those things, and we talk about how to safely utilize them with women also, because women actually make better shooters than men.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah, this is something Professor Griff, he said, if I had a choice of picking an army of 10 men or 10 women, I'm going to pick the 10 women because the women typically are better shooters and they listen better.
That is true.
So that's just part of what we talk about when we're having these classes, when we go to the community, when we're talking to these kids. We talk about the importance of being trained legally, get your carry and conceal when you're able to, buying a firearm, not from D-boy on the block, but somewhere that is a verified retailer. Going to the range, because kids can go to the range too, as long as they're with an adult. Women, again, they make firearms for women just like they make firearms for men. You can get a colored gun if you want, but, we don't even talk about that as much. But yeah, you can also get the same information that is out there for anybody. There's tons of books historically. This is the book I'm holding up called Negroes with Guns, and it talked about self-defense act that happened here in North Carolina, where I am, with the Ku Klux Klan in this Black community. There's just so much information out there. People can Google all kind of information when it comes to guns and safety, and these are just things that we want to talk to the community about.
Yeah, and I think it's much needed, and especially when it comes to the younger generation, because they're the ones upcoming, they're the ones getting the information, they're the ones that are exposed to all these things through the media, through the internet, through social media. So I think it's really important the work that you guys are all doing, and I love the impact that you're making across the globe, and especially when it comes to our kids and the younger generation, because they're the ones, the future impact of the world. And I know we spoke a lot about that in some conversations that we've had. So, today I definitely want the audience listening in to come away with a good perspective and understanding of everything that you're doing. And, if there's one thing you want to leave the audience with today with in terms of your impact and, what we should be knowing in terms of our motivation, what are some lasting thoughts that you definitely want to leave our audience with today and keep impacting?
Mental health has to be dealt with head on. We have to own our crap. I don't want to curse on here, but people know what I mean when I say crap.
Right.
We have to own our crap. It's just like any other problem, addiction, or what have you. There has to be an awareness of it. There has to be an acceptance of it, and it has to be considered. It's kind of like a contract. So a contract has three parts: an agreement, acceptance, and consideration. So we have to look at mental health in the same context. There has to be an agreement that there's a mental health issue or issues. There has to be an acceptance of that, and there has to be consideration. How are you going to plan it out? What's the plan of action? So we have to look at it in the contractual context to be able to deal with it effectively. The other thing I would say is, again, community is common plus unity plus dialogue. We have to talk to each other. If I want to talk crap, I can go to the barbershop. However, in these rooms like Clubhouse or on different platforms that you see, we have to be willing to talk to people that we've never met.
Right.
I've never met you in person.
Right.
Here we are having a conversation. I have to be able to meet you where you are, just like you have to be willing to meet me where I am.
Right.
So the other thing I would say is we got to get back to our humanity. It doesn't matter what race you are, gender, ethnicity. There's a line that KRS-One says in a song called Human Education Against Lies. And he said, before your color, first you're human. Teaching humanity is what we're doing. We have to get back to our humanity, because I believe that if we get back to our humanity, we will see less and less of these active violent events, whether we're talking in a home, like with domestic violence, because that's something that I dealt with a lot when I would get 911 calls. I dealt a lot with mental health issues at the firehouse and the private EMS service that I worked at. So those things are at the forefront of my mind in terms of my advocacy as a first responder, even though I'm not actively in the field on a fire truck or ambulance. I still am an advocate. Right. And so these are things that I bring to the table when I'm talking to different groups and individuals. Those are things that I would leave people with, and just have an openness to have uncomfortable conversations. Right. We're not talking about being disrespectful to anybody. We're talking about, hey, we may have some uncomfortable conversation, and that's fine. And we have to agree to disagree. That's fine. Right. But let's just have the dialogue.
Yeah, and I like that you said that, have an open mind and having those uncomfortable conversations, because many people don't want to step out of their comfort zone, unfortunately, and don't want to see the other person's point of view. So, and I think that's an important lesson, especially for any kids listening in, because that's what it's all about, is the core of humanity, is being able to listen, be curious, be human, and just be compassionate and open-minded towards other people's opinions and words of advice and wisdom. And Larry, today you spread so much wisdom and words of inspiration. I'm truly grateful that you've come on here today on the Simply Real podcast, and so many great gems that you've dropped. For anybody who wants to connect with you, who wants to be a part of your advocacy, who wants to help, build with what you're doing, how can they get in contact with you? How can they connect with you?
I am available on my website at www.pentonpending. That's P as in Paul, E-N, T as in Tom, O-N, pending.com. My email address is consultingsolutions@pentonpending.com. If you go to the website, all of our social media links are listed on there. We have a link tree also that has those links. I'm on Clubhouse pretty regularly, so if you go to Clubhouse and pull up my name, it'll say Larry Penton, and it'll say LP in parentheses, which is what most people refer to me as. All of the shows that I've done with Professor Griff are listed on there. There's a number of other podcasts, including the article that I was featured on in U.S. News and World Reports. Those titles are listed in my profile. So, and my office number is 704-270-8010. So 270-8010. You can reach me at any time. If I don't connect with you right away, it'll be within 24 hours. So definitely look for me in these Clubhouse streets, because I'm in many rooms with you.
Yes, you are.
And I'm back from vacation, so you'll see me more in some of these rooms. And yeah, just reach out to me and let's talk, let's dialogue, let's show each other that not only can we get along, but let's teach more people how to survive in real time, because it's not just about violence, it's about prevention, right, and about understanding and love and humanity. So that's what I would leave your audience with.
Love it. Thank you so much, Larry Penton, everybody. Make sure and connect with him. He's doing some amazing things, him and Professor Griff. I'm a big fan of Professor Griff. I'm a big fan of yours, Larry. And I'm just so happy to have you guys talking about what you're doing in society and impacting everyone. Thank you all for tuning in today to the Simply Real podcast. Definitely go connect with Larry, and we'll see you guys all soon. Thank you so much.
Peace and blessings.